thank you. And as Katie said, we will return to the Old Bailey for those family reactions following that verdict. Let's get more now on day 2 on the election campaign. Both the Conservatives and Labour have been setting out their economic plans today, but both parties' announcements have been overshadowed by controversy and potentially damaging comments. I'm joined now by The Guardian columnist Dawn Foster and the director of public policy think tank ResPublica, Phillip. Hello to you both. So, the Shadow Chancellor and the Chancellor both standing up this morning, setting out their plans for the economy, and yet what are we talking about on both sides, both campaigns being in trouble? Dawn Foster, to you first. How damaging are these stories surrounding Labour and the Tories on just day 2 of the campaign?
I think they're slightly more damaging for the Conservatives because they haven't really put forward anything else that can actually counter them. I mean, John McDonnell was in Liverpool talking about how every time the Conservatives get into power, there is a huge issue with jobs in the economy. So Labour are talking about investing massively, kind of actually pushing forward with a better economy in the north, better jobs for all, more secure jobs against zero-hours contracts. Whereas Sajid Javid, all he can actually do is say that maybe they will look at possibly investing, which is essentially admitting that actually austerity hasn't delivered all of the things that the Conservatives promised it would in the last decade. So I think a lot of voters will be looking at the last decade and thinking about whether they and their children actually feel as if they have benefited from austerity at all. Yeah,
I mean, and you are focusing on the economy, and that is what the Labour Party and the Conservatives would want us to do. But I just want to ask you, Dawn, about these comments from Ian Austin this morning, speaking to Sky's Kay Burley, saying that Jeremy Corbyn was a disaster for the Labour Party and a disaster for the country, and urging voters not to back him, instead to back Boris Johnson.
I mean, Ian Austin hasn't been a fan of Jeremy Corbyn ever since he came in. He wasn't a fan of Ed Miliband, particularly Ed Miliband's migration policy. So Ian Austin, the last time Ian Austin properly supported a Labour leader was actually in 2010 with Gordon Brown. If Ian Austin genuinely did think that Jeremy Corbyn was a risk, he wouldn't have stood in 2017. He's essentially, accepted a job from the Conservatives now and is trying to make a fuss for his new paymasters. If he genuinely believed that Jeremy Corbyn was a risk, he shouldn't have stood for Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party in 2017 and accepted that seat and that paycheck.
Phillip, meanwhile, things go from bad to worse for the Conservatives, don't they? Got off to a bad start yesterday. Jacob Rees-Moggs comments, Alan Cairns and more. And then today we have this story about Nick Conrad, the Conservative candidate for Broadland in Norfolk, and his remarks about sexual assault, condemned by the party, but not making the right headlines.
No, and I think neither party are making the headlines they would want, and the question is why. And we have Tom Watson's resignation. I thought Ian Austin spoke very movingly this morning about how anti-Semitism has infected the Labour Party. But by the same token, the Conservative Party has made a series of gaffes and unconscionable remarks as well. I think in point of fact, we've only got 2 major choices, and so both of these aspects will damage both parties' brands, but given that one brand isn't outperforming the other brand, their effect is probably net zero, except in areas where the Lib Dems are likely to challenge. And what we actually see is both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party are fighting over working-class votes. And I don't necessarily think these comments will impinge upon that. And what I thought was interesting today is that both Sajid Javid and John McDonnell are making big expansionary post-austerity offers on the economy. But the numbers are too vague, even though Labour's quanta is enormous and vast. I think they would struggle to find at that level investable projects that could actually make a difference to people. And by the same token, the Conservatives can't claim this is outrageous increases in public expenditure when they themselves are increasing public expenditure. So it will come down to what policies they're going to fund. It will come down to the manifestos. What are they specifically going to spend their money on? That's where we'll see that these numbers, when they take on policy personality, if you can forgive that phrase. That's when it will make a difference. At the moment, it's a zero-sum game. They're both negating each other.
Yeah, and Philip, as you say, the Conservatives are targeting working-class votes. You don't think the comments will have an impact on that, but Jacob Rees-Mogg, coming from a position of privilege, talking about a lack of common sense amongst those in Grenfell Tower, another Conservative Party candidate saying those on Benefit Street should be put down, and now these comments from Nick Conrad back from 2014. It all smacks of privilege, doesn't it? And it is a return to the nasty party.
Well, it does smack of an earlier, what's the right word, an earlier manifestation of the Tory party. But I think that, you know, sorry to repeat my point, I think that when we get closer, none of these will really make a difference. I don't see these shifting swing voters. If the dominant factor is Brexit, which all the evidence says it is, it's Brexit that will shift the swing voters. And at the moment, certainly, its middle-class voters seem to be shifting towards the Liberal Democrats. If you look at Phillip Lee, what he's doing in Wokingham against John Redwood, that looks potentially a remarkable result there. But in where the real battleground is, which is can the Tories take working class seats off Labour, that battle has yet to be joined. And I think the Conservatives are in quite a good position. And if they come up with the policies that actually make a transformation to working class life, which has to be about massive investment in training, has to be about support for the family and support for women in that context, particularly in terms of transitioning them to higher levels of jobs and skills and training, then they can win this. Actually, these off-the-cuff remarks, some of which were intended, some of which weren't, won't make that much of a difference. Whereas I think the anti-Semitism charge against Labour really does resonate and has turned off a whole category of voter. But, you know, none of it's good. But we wait for the policy. That's what will shift people. And
Dawn Foster, for the Labour Party last night, the resignation of Tom Watson. He says it was personal, not political, but the timing couldn't have been worse, could it?
I mean, you know, Tom has a book out. He says he's very, very focused on actually looking at what he can do in terms of public health rather than culture. I actually think it worked relatively well for Labour in that, you know, exactly when it happened, everybody was focused on the Conservative Party launch. It took all the headlines away from it. And, you know, Tom didn't come out attacking Jeremy Corbyn. He didn't come out attacking the Labour Party. He just decided he didn't want to stand again. And he can do an awful lot of good. You know, he has a book coming out about sugar and about health and about what we can do to stop the obesity crisis in the UK. So I think that, you know, Tom very cleverly managed to take away some of the attention from the Conservative Party launch. I'm sure some Conservatives were relatively annoyed at the fact that happened. But, you know, again, Tom hasn't come out and attacked the party. And I do disagree with what Phillip said. I think working class voters will be looking at a lot of the comments by the Conservatives and feeling very angry about them. And it isn't just the Brexit election. A lot of it will be about health and about schools. And, you know, we're already looking at a number of hospitals who are facing winter NHS crises. And when you look at Labour voters, more of them care more about health than Brexit. So I think that once actually the parties widen out the policies that they are putting forward, I think the Conservatives will struggle to actually get working class voters on side.
Dawn Foster, Philip Blond, thank you both very much.
Thank you.